Next, we have Mr. Tom Osborne. Tom is an Oceana County native, graduating from Hart High School in 1969 after earning a BA and MS from Michigan State University in Water Resource Development and a PhD from Utah State University in Fisheries Biology. He and his family moved to Austin, Texas, where he worked with an environmental and engineering consulting firm for the next 24 years. Most of this time, he was a manager of the hazardous waste remediation group within the company, working with mining and industrial clients, cleaning up after past sins, helping them design, permit, and construct new operations, and conducting the environmental due diligence associated with buying or selling operations. This career took him around the world a few times, working in some 15 different countries. This progressed to the opportunity to serve as the manager of an environmental health and safety operations for 8 large hydroelectric stations in southern Brazil. After 4 years of total Portuguese immersion and a great experience, he and his wife decided to retire from the corporate world and return to Pentwater. He took the job as emergency management coordinator in 2008, and he remains in that capacity. Let's welcome Tom.
I am the emergency management coordinator for Oceana County, and that's a county office. There's one of my bosses, according to the county board. But we are also effectively a part of the Michigan State Police Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security here in the state, and we also are supported and basically the local representative for the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA. Oceana County is, we're not here by ourselves, we're part of a 13-county region, Region 6 in the state of Michigan, basically from Mason County over to Clare down to Ionia County and over to Ottawa County, centered on Grand Rapids. The point I'm making there is that we're part of a regional partnership, and if we face large issues where any one of our counties is taxed in terms of resources and response, we know we have each other to count on and to call on, and that partnership is very important to me for a small county such as Oceana County. The issues I'm going to address largely were talked about by Hal, but very quickly in a bullet format, we're going to talk about hydrogen sulfide issues with wells, the chemicals used, flowback fluid handling, chemical and waste transport issues, transparency, cooperation, relationships with the drilling operations, and our community's right to know, nuisance odors, and infrastructure issues. As you all know here, oil drilling, oil exploration in Michigan and even in Oceana County is not a new thing. It's been going on for decades. In this part of the world, we often drill through formations that contain hydrogen sulfide. That's been going on for a long, long time. It's way before the concern for these horizontal well fracking situations. Hydrogen sulfide is that rotten egg smell. It's very noxious at very low concentrations and relatively harmless. But at high concentrations, it can be extremely dangerous. In fact, at high concentrations, you don't smell it. Much of the natural gas produced in our area is sour gas. It contains high hydrogen sulfide levels. We have a sour gas pipeline that runs through our county. Gas from the various operations transported north to Manistee, where the sulfide is taken out of it, making it a sweet gas, and it's put into the distribution system. Our local responders, our fire people, our EMS people, are very aware of this. We've been dealing with hydrogen sulfide for several decades. All of our fire departments are equipped with hydrogen sulfide sensors, and those are one of the first things we think about when we think about an incident at an oil well. All oil drillers, if they anticipate drilling through hydrogen sulfide formation, are required to submit an H2S Contingency Plan with my office before the drilling takes place. I, in fact, just received one yesterday. So, within that contingency plan, all the neighbors within a quarter of a mile are identified by phone number, by address. There is the contacts for emergency responders, local fire departments, EMS, Sheriff's Department, and there are plans for evacuation and other issues in case there is a release at site. This also involves having hydrogen sulfide monitors on site so that their own people can be alerted if there's danger, but also to let us know that we have a high-risk situation developing. Chemicals used. And here I'm talking about the chemicals used in these new high-volume horizontal drilling fracking operations. We've heard, and they stressed it, that it is a very, very small amount of chemical, percentage-wise, that's being used in the drilling operation. Most of what's going into the fracking operation is water and sand. But as I say, a small percentage of a very large number can be a very large number. If you're using 5 million gallons of water in a fracking operation and 1% of it is chemical additives, that's still 50,000 gallons of chemicals. And so we're talking about potentially a lot of chemicals. Granted, most of these chemicals are not terribly exotic or particularly dangerous, if you will, if you know about them. But some of the chemicals used are quote, hazardous materials, and or some of them are in quantities that are high enough that they can be risky. Methanol is an alcohol. Alcohol fires have certain characteristics. They are particularly dangerous. They can't be fought with certain kind of foams, and they have to be approached in a very different manner than perhaps other kinds of fires. Hydrochloric acid is, it's a chemical that, say our phone companies, when they have a bunch of batteries stored at their local switching stations, they have to report that to me because those are reportable quantities of hazardous materials. The Emergency Planning Community Right to Know Act of 1986, it's also known as Title III. That is a Community Right to Know Act. That plan was put in place directly as a result of the catastrophe that took place in Bhopal, India, back in 1984, when Union Carbide allowed the release of methyl isocyanate and killed thousands of people in a community that really didn't even know that the chemical was in their midst. Caused us to do some self-reflection here in the United States. Hey, we have a lot of this going on right in our own communities, and our people have a right to know that we've got these kinds of things going on. Resulted in Title III being put in place and the reporting requirements that have followed. Bottom line is it means that we as a community and we as responders, because there is a companion firefighter right to know act that goes along with it, have a right to know that we've got dangerous chemicals in the community, and that our responders and our community are aware of them. We know that they're being handled properly and disposed of properly if they need to go off site. We also need to know this kind of information for our medical community. If we have people coming in, we need to know what kind of exposures they were experiencing so that we can treat them properly. We also, with that kind of information, are better able to approach a spill or a release situation because we know what it is we're dealing with. And then that's related to the odor issue. We suddenly get a very odd odor coming from the facility. If we know what they have, we have a better idea. Is it dangerous? How dangerous is it? And how should we approach it? Talk about the proprietary chemicals, the trade secret things. From my standpoint, from an emergency management standpoint, that's something that's got to be resolved. Having companies be able to say, I've got this secret chemical that I'm using and I'm putting it into into this operation here, an operation that allows it to be, by definition, released into the environment, is a little iffy from my perspective. We still need to know if this is a hazardous material, is it something the community should be aware of. Our responders need to be aware of what it is, and I think that's something that needs to be resolved down the line, how they handle this idea of having secret chemicals that may or may not be important for our community to know about. Material safety data sheet, Hal said that they are available, they are submitted to the state. As it stands now, I don't get them, and so our responders don't get them. I'd like to see a situation where the drillers are required to make sure that the local community, the management office, or our local hazardous material response team has access to those sheets ahead of time before the drilling takes place, so at least we will know what we're facing if we have to go in an emergency situation. Then there's this curious thing called the Halliburton Loophole. The Energy Policy Act 2005, was put in place in the previous administration, has provisions in it that excludes fracking fluids from regulation by Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, and other environmental acts. And I'm guessing that that's something that is going to be addressed and challenged, because it kind of goes contrary to the other issues relating to community, having the right to know and having a response capability in place. Flowback fluid is a fluid that comes back. If you put 5 or 10 million gallons of water into a formation to do the pressurization and cracking, some percentage of that's going to come back at you. It's not 100% by any stretch of imagination. It can be 5%, 20%, but it's water that has to be pumped back out of the well, along with the sand and along with all the rest of the chemicals that went in. Yes, it's water in a sense. It's, as Hal mentioned, it's collected here in Michigan in frac tanks, which are large roll-off rectangular tank cars, if you will. And then it's transported off, and in Michigan, this material is typically injected into Class 2 deep injection wells for disposal. This can be a pretty smelly operation if it's not conducted properly. We had an issue here in December at the Riley well that he talked about, where they were having difficulty getting their flare lit because there was a lot of nitrogen used in the fracking, and that caused some pressure problems that didn't allow them to flare up the way they wanted to. So a lot of the gases coming back in this fluid were escaping and being released into the atmosphere. It caused some pretty sharp odors to be distributed throughout the Benona and Golden Township area for several days. And that's kind of not a good neighbor kind of an issue. We were not really aware that the drilling was going on at that time. We'll talk about that here in just a second in terms of community involvement. But we got the calls about odors, and we were sending fire departments out there time after time before we really understood that we had a drilling operation going on, and we were in a post-fracking recovery period, and then we were getting these kind of methane escapes only because the flare was going. We'll talk about spill risk and road issues here in a few minutes. Right now, in fact, these chemicals, all the chemicals on all the equipment associated with drilling has to come on the site. It has to be transported onto the site, and these wastes have to be hauled away. One of the risks associated with any kind of an operation that's often overlooked is the actual transportation component of it. And I've mentioned nuclear waste transport here only because early in my career I worked in projects involved in evaluating the performance of potential nuclear waste repositories. These are the places that are supposed to hold our nuclear power plant waste uranium, and they're designed to last 10,000 years or more. The engineering part of that, the hydraulic part of that was something that could be addressed. It could be evaluated by engineers and scientists very effectively, actually. But a component we kept coming back to that was a risk that had immediate significance to communities. How do we get this nuclear waste to this safe repository? And it all had to do with either shipping it by rail or by truck or by some other way that put it out into the communities and had the risk of a train wreck, a truck accident, a spill of high-level nuclear waste would be something that you don't clean up in an afternoon. With these kinds of wastes moving in and out of our community, we need to know about them so that if we have one of these frac tanks leaking all the way out of town, we know who it was that caused the leak. If we have an accident, a truck turns over and releases its contents, we know what it's got on it, what kind of spill response we have to make, and what kind of notifications we have to do to make sure our people stay safe. Air quality I kind of already hinted at. These kinds of odors can impact a significant area. It takes a very low concentration of some of these things to cause a pretty smelly situation downwind for some period of time. And it's often impacting people in the surrounding the well that really aren't benefiting, at least directly, from the presence of that well. So it's a difficult situation. People are waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to sleep because a neighbor half a mile or a mile away is drilling a well on his property. There are political consequences there in addition to safety consequences. The other curious thing is the people that are on site actually doing the work are often very unaware that this kind of leak is taking place. They work around this stuff all the time. They don't smell it like you and I do. It's sort of like a septic tank operator. He doesn't really know that he smells like he does when he walks to help you out. Now, these sites do have H2S monitors on site for obvious reasons, their own worker safety, and they're set to go off if the concentration exceeds typically 20 parts per million. That's important to somebody like me because when we get these multiple calls coming in during an excursion, I need to call out there and find out, do we have a dangerous situation? Do we have hydrogen sulfide being released into the community? It affects how we handle this from a fire response and from an ambulance response and other things. And having a contact available to me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is very important in that regard. If we get these kinds of calls from the neighbors, we want to know, do we have a nuisance issue or do we have an emergency issue? And so the reason I bring that up is because another example is these operations coming into the community, blowing in, doing their thing, and blowing back out again. There's a step missing in my mind, and that is letting us know what's going on. Kind of leads into the slide, the transparency and cooperation issue. We as responders, we as an emergency management organization would very much like to know, I guess you could almost say we demand, to know when the hydrogen sulfide formations are going to be encountered so that we know that we should be on our toes. If something comes in, we know we've got a potentially dangerous H2S emission going on. We'd like to know what chemicals are going to be on site. And we'd also like to have an idea of the quantities and, if possible, where they're being stored, because if we have to respond to one of these sites, there's quite a number of vehicles there. There are pumping trucks, there are chemical trucks, there are mixing facilities, there are sand units, and then there are all the frac tanks that recover the fluids. We'd like to know what it is, what we're getting into if we have to respond to the site. We'd also like to know that fracking is going to begin and end, so that if we start getting some of these smell complaints or other things, and we start seeing a lot of trucks on the road, we know what's going on. We're not here to be police. We're not here to tell them how to do their work. We just want to know, should we be on our toes or not, because it's something you're doing. And having a contact at their facility 24/7, so that I can call them when I get the complaints. It would be very, very useful. These are just functions of being a good neighbor and a good housekeeper, a good member of the community. And then finally, a road situation, and really an emergency management issue, but we have we're a small county with a lot of secondary rural roads, and most of us already know the condition many of them are in. And having these large trucks roll in and out has an impact, especially certain times of the year on the condition of our roads. But we also have small volunteer fire departments in our communities. We have a small EMS that is only 2 or 3 ambulances available at any one time. We have a small local hospital. We don't even have a hazardous material response team in Oceana County. Part of our partnership deal that I mentioned at the beginning, we teamed with our region. We have a regional response team located in Muskegon. Our local responders are trained to contain hazardous material spill, to isolate it, and then we call in experts who are trained in actual hazardous material cleanup to come in and help us in these circumstances. Because we have small fire departments, limited spill response capability, we very much count on organizations like these drillers to keep us informed of what's going on. We can't be running out 5 and 6 times in one day responding to odor responses or odor complaint calls. We need to have a communication network with them to know what's going on so that we aren't wasting our resources. So, that's all I have. Bottom line is I'd like to stress my office does not have a position on this. I'm not pro-fracking, I'm not anti-fracking. I just want to work with the organizations if they're going to be here. And please try to impress upon them that we need certain kinds of information in a timely manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Now we have Chuck Thompson.
Yay.
Chuck has a degree in journalism and communications from the University of Illinois. After graduating, he was awarded a commission in the United States Air Force, where he served as a special agent in the Office of Special Investigations, for which he conducted security, criminal, and counterintelligence investigations domestically and overseas. He certainly is no stranger to Oceana County. His grandparents started vacationing here in 1904, and his family has done so ever since. He has never missed a summer here. After retiring, he and his wife Jane moved to Oceana County more than 11 years ago. They've been permanent residents ever since and have been active in a variety of community organizations. Chuck freely acknowledges that he does not have advanced degrees in geology or the oil and gas industry technology. He sees that as an advantage in being able to analyze the subjects objectively. He has edited a book on hydraulic fracturing. He has spent thousands of hours researching the topic of hydraulic fracturing. The well-researched information that he brings to this fracking forum contains facts gathered from industry, regulatory, government, media, and independent sources. Beginning with a pro-fracking viewpoint, his research has led to a different perspective, which he will share with you now. Thank you, Chuck.
Yay.
Thank you very much, Larry. And thank you to the Planning Commission for giving us an opportunity to discuss this very important topic. And I thank you all for showing up this afternoon. I know there are a lot of other diversions. I was hoping there would be more here, but I thank you all for coming. Now, I agree with the fracking industry and the DEQ on many points. One thing in particular is that there has been a lot of disinformation about fracking floating around. The industry and the DEQ repeatedly state, and they pretty much have today, in their comments and their literature, that hydraulic fracturing has been going on in Michigan for more than 60 years, with more than 50,000 wells drilled without any really serious problems. Now let me quote from an official document. This type of well completion operation has created some unique conditions not typical of conventionally completed wells. These include on-site large volume water withdrawals, freshwater pits, larger volumes of chemical additives, and larger volumes of flowback water. This instruction applies to all high-volume hydraulic fracturing well completions. Now, that statement was written by Mr. Hal Fitch, and I think there he is acknowledging the fact that, Larry, how do we get this thing off here? Acknowledging the fact that there are differences. As a matter of fact, just by looking at the terms, the old fracking was called conventional. The new fracking is called unconventional. Now, to me, if something is unconventional, it's not the same as conventional. Well, thinking about that, I was invited to have lunch today. I couldn't go with them, but I know Larry and Mr. Willson and Mr. Fitch had lunch at the Brown Bear, and that's one of my favorite places to go to. I've had the Bear Burger, and it's terrific, but it's a little big. I usually go for the Wimpy Burger. It's big enough. Now, I kind of like to, this reminds me of kind of a rough analogy, comparing the Wimpy Burger to the old conventional fracking, and not even the Bear Burger, which is 4 times as big, to the new unconventional fracking. To me, the new fracking is more like, it's comparing the Wimpy Burger to eating the whole steer. I mean, it's not just quantity, it's totally different things involved as well. Now, I think another thing that we need to clarify is the definition of hydraulic fracturing. It's just one, the hydraulic fracturing itself, the blasting open the pores in the rock, is just one of many phases involved in the entire operation. It involves clearing the land, preparing it, transporting materials, mixing chemicals, drilling, fracking, pressurizing all the materials, inserting them, processing, storing, and disposing of flowback and produced water, and eventually remediating the fracking site. Now, when it's said that fracking has caused no problems, and you're just referring to the limited one step of fracturing itself, you're not really referring to the whole operation. You're referring to a small part of it. And I think that's a little bit disingenuous. Now, the fracking industry and the DEQ also repeatedly state that fracking is safe, without any serious problems, and that we shouldn't be concerned about it. Now, let me directly quote from a written report, and again, pardon me for reading, but I want to get this absolutely right. We face a variety of hazards and risks that could cause substantial financial losses. Our business involves a variety of operating risks, including well site blowouts, cratering and explosions, equipment failures, pipe or cement failures, and casing collapses, which can release natural gas, oil, drilling fluids, or hydraulic fracturing fluids. Uncontrolled flows of natural gas, oil, or well fluids, pipeline ruptures, fires, formations with abnormal pressures, handling and disposal of materials, including drilling fluids and hydraulic fracturing fluids, release of toxic gas, buildup of naturally occurring radioactive materials, pollution and other environmental risks, including conditions caused by previous owners or lessors of our properties and natural disasters. There's more. Any of these events could result in injury or loss of human life, loss of hydrocarbons, significant damage to or destruction of property, environmental pollution, regulatory investigations or penalties, suspension or impairment of our operations, and substantial loss to us. Our operation of natural gas gathering and pipeline systems also involves various risks, including the risk of explosions and environmental hazards caused by pipeline leaks and ruptures. There's more, but I won't go on with that. This was not written by an environmental group or some anti-fracking group. These quotations are from a legal document dated February 28, 2013, filed by Cabot Oil and Gas Corporation in its official Form 10-K annual report to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. A sworn document to the government. If Cabot, which is one of the larger corporations in the fracking industry, semi-privately attests to these extremely serious risks, how can the fracking industry and the federal and state regulatory agencies mandated with protecting the environment and the public legitimately claim that fracking presents no serious risks? One of the industry leaders just outlined them for you. I think they have a perspective that would not say that if it weren't true. Oh, I know in my area where I live, a lot of us, and I'll bet a lot of you too, are subjected to very stringent requirements when we want to build a garage or put up a gazebo or screen in or glass in a screen porch or whatever, take down a tree. We see the DEQ as being right on top of it, making everybody jump through hoops, trying to get everything done just right, and they're very stringent. I think that's the impression that a lot of people have about the DEQ, and in those regards, I commend them for that. They are on top of things. Now, when it comes to the oil and gas industry, I think some of those situations get a little mixed. This is a shot from a Halliburton report. This is the first fracturing well done by Halliburton in 1949. I want you to compare that, the size, the scope, the operation of the vehicles, to this. This is from the same Halliburton brochure showing a modern fracking site. I think you'll agree there's a little bit of difference there. We talk about differences between the conventional and the unconventional. I won't go through all of this, but you can see on the left, in the blue, we have the old conventional, which happened in the past, that they frequently refer to. Vertical line on the left is the vertical bore. The red one on the right is the vertical bore of the new unconventional fracking. The old ones used to go to relatively shallow depths, take an average here, say around 2,000 feet. The new ones can go up to 12,000 feet. Pressure on the old ones around 2,000 psi. New ones around 10,000, even up to 13,000 psi. Chemicals, they used very few. Unconventional, more than 1,000 chemicals can be used, many of which are highly toxic. Water use, around 10,000 gallons per well in the conventional old version. And we have one in Michigan that used over 21 million gallons of water. Pressure. Quick slide to show you a difference in the pressure. And here's something on water use. I think everyone is concerned about the use of water in fracturing. On the left, we have the old Antrim shale average, around 10,000 gallons of water used. And when I say used, we think about situations where we use water. Agriculture, residential use, industry, etc. use a tremendous amount of water. So why are we so concerned about fracking? Because fracking doesn't just use the water, and it gets recycled into the hydrological system. It literally destroys the water, and it has to be put into these deep injection wells, never to be used again. So when we're going from 10,000 gallons up to 21, when we're going up, here's the typical Utica Collingwood shale average around 6 million gallons. Here's in Canada State Excelsior, 21 million. And there have been wells proposed and I believe approved up in the Manistee watershed using 31.5 million gallons. Now, it was said that the methane combines with the air and I believe combines with the oxygen and it creates water that returns to the system, right?
No, the methane atom, the chain releases water.
Releases water, right. But,
7 million gallons per release.
okay, but where does that water wind up? Does it wind up where it was drawn from? No, it goes into the atmosphere and it might wind up 2 states over. So, let me continue with this. You've already seen this map. I won't go into that. Here are the deep injection wells. Now, here's a situation getting down to things close at hand. I can't attest for the validity of this chart, but according to the authors and the researchers on this, these diagonal lines here represent faults, not just minor ones, but major basin-wide faults in the Michigan Basin. You can see one over here coming down from up around Pentwater all the way across Oceana County, going into Nuevo County, a major basin scale fault. And I added this, the Riley 122 well just west of Mears is pretty close to that fault. I'm not a geologist, but I wonder how risky that might be. Now here's something I want to get into further with the Riley well. As Tom said, there really wasn't a whole lot of notice about this, and a lot of people didn't know it was going to happen. The rumor mill had it that maybe it was, but I think the first time anybody really knew about it was when these overwhelming odors were filling the air. I have a friend at Silver Lake who, as a result of this fracking, it was in the winter, it was in December, with all the doors and windows closed. And she was having severe headaches, dizziness, general aches and pains, and had tremendous difficulty breathing. They were about to take her to the emergency room when luckily the wind shifted and she didn't have to go. But those aromas were smelled over a 12-mile radius, depending upon the winds. Now, I don't know what happened as a result with the driller, if there was ever a penalty or a fine or remediation of that. But to me, residents of Oceana County, residents of any place, have a right to breathe uncontaminated, clean air. Isn't this a basic right? Now, when a drilling company, a private operation, goes into an area, takes water from an aquifer, and they're not necessarily taking it just from the area underneath them. If you drill here down to an aquifer to get your water to frack a well, you're not only taking water from there, you're taking it from everybody else who's involved with the aquifer. So they're taking really private water sources using them with no compensation. They're polluting the air, causing people to get sick. I don't know. I can see the point that they've done wonderful things in terms of boosting the economy in certain areas, but at what price? I talked to a friend of mine just yesterday who works for ConocoPhillips in Oklahoma. He was saying that they are currently in a market boom time with a glut of natural gas. There's 4 times the supply of natural gas than there is demand. In fact, according to him, the industry was looking for a way to jack up the prices because the price of natural gas has gotten so low because they've drilled and produced so much of it. Now, so are we in a situation where we have to have more and more and more drilling? I don't think so. We already have more than meets the market demand. In fact, there's a push now to increase the exportation of natural gas. They have approved new ports, and we're going to be liquefying it and sending it overseas. So we want to drill Michigan to send liquefied natural gas to China. I don't think that's a real good idea. Up at the top in the red, pardon me while I get my glasses. Okay, the amount of the wrong glasses. Oh yeah, the bond. Considering all the risks involved in drilling a well and all that can happen in the neighborhood, the air, the water, the land, everything, the bond listed on the Riley well west of Mears. The bond listed was $20,000. Do you think that would take care of all the possible situations that would come up? In green is the location. It was in Golden Township. Here, number 18 in blue, is sour gas or is sour oil or gas expected? Yes is checked. Yes is checked. So they knew it was coming. Were they prepared to handle it? No, they didn't, because it was spreading all over the county. Also, another thing that's used in terms of hydraulic fracturing is cement. Production of cement takes a tremendous amount of energy, and it contributes to greenhouse gas emissions. In this case, they were saying they would use 2,245 sacks of cement. They also use a tremendous amount of sand. Now, if you go to Wisconsin and Iowa and Minnesota, they are doing the equivalent of coal mine mountaintop removal, and they're changing the landscape. They're totally destroying the scenic views of much of Wisconsin, coming up with all of the sand that it takes to frack these wells. Also, circle in red here. I think if you were to apply for a permit to do a minor addition to your house or some little thing, you would expect to pay a fair fee. In terms of this particular well, the Riley 122 well, their permit fee was all of $300. The DEQ and all related organizations, and I include the DEQ, the DNR, the Office of Oil, Gas, and Minerals, under the same classification of DEQ, just for simplification purposes. They spend a tremendous amount of time and paperwork and inspection going out to check this and all other wells. Can they handle that for $300? I don't know. Oh, by the way, did you know, I was talking about the DEQ being extremely stringent on individuals and permits for all sorts of things. But did you know that according to Michigan law, The Michigan DEQ is mandated to maximize the production of oil and gas in Michigan. I had always assumed that its first priority was to protect the environment and the resources and the residents, but they do consider that, but listed first is their mandate to maximize production. I don't know if anybody of you went to the fracking meeting at Muskegon Community College on May 9. I thought that was very interesting. They had about a dozen police and security people there, armed with guns and tasers. I don't know what they expected us to do, but it was rather an intimidating presence. After the presentations, which were strictly from the industry and DEQ, or from the DEQ rather, I spoke with some of the presenters, and I asked them about the Riley 122 well. They said that the drill had been broken off thousands of feet down, and it was unrecoverable for almost 2 weeks. They had used liquid nitrogen, which sucks oxygen out of the air. They used that, and then when they couldn't light the flare because the oxygen had been sucked out, they evidently were at a loss to figure out why they couldn't light the flare. Well, these are pros. I would think they would know the consequences. We had problems again in May when the fracking fluids, the flowback evidently was coming up. They certainly expected those. There were big smells, aromas problems again. Now, I would think they would have expected that, and I would think they would have gone into the storage tanks that they were supposed to be stored in. Now, either they didn't go into those tanks, or the tanks leaked because we had aromas going for a long time. I understand that a well was drilled, or is in the process of being drilled at Juniper Beach, just a few hundred feet from Lake Michigan. Now, we all know what a treasure Lake Michigan is to our county and our state. I'm not a geologist, but an awful lot of people have expressed to me their concerns and their questions about how wise this is. We don't want to mess with Lake Michigan, do we? There are millions of acres of land in Michigan and the United States. Are we going to risk, 18% of the world's natural or freshwater supplies to produce a little more gas when we already have too much? Amen. That doesn't make sense to me. They talked about Kalkaska. In their permits, this well in Kalkaska was authorized to do one water well drilling to produce the water for their fracking operation. They didn't get adequate water out of that one well, so they proceeded to drill 7 more wells, none of which provided adequate water. So what did they do? They went to the village of Kalkaska, and here you can see one of their water trucks taking water from the hydrant in the village of Kalkaska. They took water all day, drove it back to the site, used that, but that still wasn't enough. So they drilled another well, another water well, off the site, close to it but off the site, to try to come up with the water that was needed. That didn't produce enough either. So they went back to the village and proceeded to take water for days out of the Kalkaska water system. Now you could say there aren't any harmful effects from doing this, but when you take water out of a system, what's going to happen? You're not going to have as much water in the system. And so, sure enough, here's a researcher, a doctor, testing the water of a well up in that area, and all that's coming out is a little dribble. This is in the Kalkaska area where the water level dropped 11 feet as a result of this taking the water by the frackers from the municipal water source and the surrounding area. Now, and it was coming out with kind of a milky color. Now, again, I don't know what the priorities are, but it seems to me that citizens should have a right to have their water not drained off, and who is going to pay for putting in a new well to replace the one that evidently isn't working? Now, we've had a little experience in Oceana County, but not very much in terms of number of wells drilled or the time involved. So I think we have to look to other states where they do have experience in numbers and time. Now, let me read just a little bit from a letter written, and I know Pennsylvania they put down as not being a valid indicator, and things have changed there in terms of casings and that sort of thing. But here's part of a letter that concerned citizens of Pennsylvania wrote to officials in Illinois, and I think this applies to Michigan as well. We write today to urge you not to allow high-volume horizontal fracking for oil and gas. We are among many victims of fracking, informed by extensive first-hand experience with the oil and gas industry and suffering from the impacts. We implore you with the greatest sincerity to protect the health and safety of the people and swiftly enact a moratorium on fracking. We have learned the hard way that regulations, no matter how strict they sound on paper, do not provide adequate protection to health or property, especially in tough economic times when the state agencies charged with enforcing the regulations are understaffed and underfunded. Also, regulations cannot prevent accidents, and in this industry, it is prone to accidents of an exceptionally frightening nature and whose effects are not temporary. Now, speaking about inspections, out of all of the tens of thousands of wells that were talked about, do you know how many inspectors there are to inspect all those wells in the state of Michigan? 22. 22. How many wells can 22 inspectors inspect in a year, let alone when they're on top of one for a continual period of time? That's, to me, not real stringent inspection. And I'm just going to run through, as I'm speaking, some other shots of what's happened in various other states with fracking. One issue that was mentioned before is roads. And we're all aware of the problems and the lack of money and people we have to take care of roads. Heavy equipment, trucks, traffic have a tremendous effect on the roads. And who has to pay for it? Now, here's one accident loaded with waste materials where trucks have collided. Here, a chemical truck has exploded. Road damages. Here's what's happened in these states. In Texas, they've taken in $3.6 billion as a result of fracking, and the road damages cost $4 billion. Arkansas, taken in $182 million, and the road damage greatly exceeds that. Pennsylvania, the same thing. How economically viable is that? Another leak. You know, in a perfect world, fracking probably would be a great idea. But you all know Murphy's Law, if something can go wrong, it probably will. People make mistakes, equipment fails, things don't work out as planned, always. And here we're talking about an industry that's just been in effect really for several years. In Michigan, just a couple of years. And the long-term effects are going to keep multiplying the longer we go. Here was an attempt to block off and sop up some of the spilled fluid in a creek. Here's the result. We're talking about the amount of the chemicals. Yes, I think it was Tom who mentioned that it's a small percentage of what goes into the well. But here's a representation compared to a house and a family here. Those are all the chemicals, those gallons, those 55-gallon drums, represent the chemicals that would go into one fracking well. Now, some of the chemicals are benign, some are used in household products and other things that are perfectly safe. A lot of others are not. I think it's interesting, too, that a lot of chemicals such as benzene, which are considered extremely hazardous and limited in use and protective measures, in any other industry are called hazardous. But when they're used in the oil and gas industry, they are considered non-hazardous. The same materials. And this all flows back to the Halliburton Loophole. Now, if fracking is so safe, why did they need to be exempted from the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and 5 other crucial environmental bills? Why? If it's safe, why the exemptions? I think you can answer that one yourselves. Here's a fire and explosion at a fracking site. Here's a truck that exploded, taking waste material, produced water, flowback water, and chemicals back to a deep well injection site, and it exploded, killing 3 people. So when you talk about hydraulic fracturing not ever causing a problem, if you're talking about only that very limited process of doing the fracking itself, that's probably true. But that's a tiny portion of the whole picture. You've got to look at the entire picture, and this is part of the picture. This is another part. Pipelines. If they are successful in developing gas, they either have to truck it to a place that can process it, or build pipelines to carry it. Now, did you know that, according to federal law, that property owners can be forced to have pipelines and roads built on their property without their permission to haul, to convey natural gas? We talk about freedom and individual rights. I think some of them are being stepped out a little bit. Health impact costs. Here's what it's costing in terms of nitrogen and volatile organic chemicals in a few plays across the country. And I love the way they call them plays. To me, it's not really a play. It's pretty serious business. Barnett play, health costs $73 million a year. Marcellus, a lot more. Fayetteville, more. Agricultural losses, $28 million. Now, what are our industries in Michigan? Manufacturing, agriculture, and tourism. Pure Michigan. Pure Michigan. How pure is hydrogen sulfide and all of these other chemicals and water destruction, air destruction, all sorts of other things? To me, that isn't pure. Let me read one more thing from Pennsylvania. Water contamination has been widespread. Our air has been polluted. Countless individuals and families have been sickened. Farms have been devastated. Cattle and other animals have died. And our pristine streams and rivers have turned up dead fish. Only a fraction of the promised jobs and revenue for the states have come to fruition, and our communities have been transformed into toxic industrial zones with 24/7 noise, flares, thousands of trucks, and increased crime. The jobs have made many workers so sick they can no longer work in the industry. Silica sand is one of the problems. They use tremendous amounts of that, as mentioned, and that is not the safest material in the world. Silicosis is a result of that. I'm kind of shifting around in my presentation a little bit because I want to respond to some of the other questions that came up. Pennsylvania is hardly the only state. There are many other states that are having problems. I'll have to cut this short because we're running out of time. But I noticed the first speaker had a half hour, so I would hope I would get equal time.
Yay!
45 minutes. Oh, I have? Oh. Okay, sorry, but to me this is a very important thing. And we have multiple people on the other side, and I'm kind of doing the solo on this.
Yeah, right.
So even if I take a little more time, I still have a fraction of the time that the industry has. All right. Methane, yes. 72 times, or over a 20-year span, 72 times the greenhouse gas emissions is carbon dioxide. We can't afford that. Water shortages. We're having extreme water shortages. Here's a map of the U.S. water quality, or quantity rather, quality. You can see some of it's in Michigan. Close up on Michigan. I'd love to have more time to go through this. About half of the natural gas, the fracking plays are in areas where there is already a water shortage. And we're taking huge amounts of water to do that and destroying it. Some of it's getting recycled, some of it isn't. The water cycle was mentioned. So, to me, it comes down to priorities. We have natural gas. We need it. Do we have to drill for it in Michigan, Oceana County? We can always get it from other places. Do we want to become a third world country like Nigeria? Or do we want to preserve what Michigan is all about? Fresh water, clean air, preserving agriculture. I think if I had more time, I would love to go into some of the economic aspects of this too, because it winds up costing counties and areas a whole lot more than the claims made would indicate. So in conclusion, let me just say that we need to look at these images and we need to figure what we want to do and what our priorities are. I'm all for gas and business and profits and energy security and all that sort of thing. But Michigan has things that can't be replaced by drilling our way to more and more gas. We already have more than we can use. So I want to tell you that are the tables out in the hall? There are people here who have petitions. Just 1 second. Petitions for those who want to ban fracking in Michigan. There will be people in the hallways who will let you sign those. I want to thank you very much for your attention and courtesy. I wish I had more time, but I don't. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yay. Well, I believe I found the fracking site. This is looking north on 48th Street. It's surprising to me how close we are to Lake Michigan. You know, I used to come up here a lot. And we'll drive up there. But, you know, I was thinking, okay, in Mears, come on into Mears, and then there's the sign about the dune rides in Lake Michigan and all that. And, I'll turn the camera on. But that would have been too long a drive with a camera on. I mean, we're so close to Lake Michigan. It's spooky. Anyway, this is it right here. I understand this gate. Shit, it's open. I'm going to go just pull right in. I think I will. Not just say I'm lost. Authorized personnel. Huh. What is that? So I wonder what would happen. No, let's find out. Prosecuted for trespassing, I suppose. Do I care? I don't know. Maybe. This is a farm here. Looks like anyway. So what's all of this? This looks like farmers. I might just knock on a door. A lot of people around. 1785. Hey. Name's Dan. And I'm looking for a fracking well up here. Any idea? Looking for a fracking well. There's an oil well up here. Oil well? Yeah, that road right there, that's it. Right back there.
This field? No, it's right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's in the road. You take the road, follow, and the end.
You ever go back there?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I'll drive back there, it's okay?
yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Take the road and
Yeah.
the gate.
Yep.
Go in.
Okay, man. Hey, I heard that there was a time that thing spewed out a bunch of odor and stink, and do you know anything about that?
No, I don't know, but sometimes we live here and sometimes
You smell it? Yeah.
The thing, the oil, the
Yeah. Yeah, I got
strong
you.
the smell. That.
Yep. See, I had a hard time just finding the darn place, man. If I'm going to drive in there, you think I'll get arrested? You think I'll get arrested? You think they'll lock me up if I drive in there?
Yeah.
You think they'll shoot me?
No.
You think they'll... I don't know. You think it's okay for me to drive in there?
I think so.
Yeah, I might give it a try. Yeah. Is there a bunch of people in there?
No, nobody there.
They're not working now?
No, I don't know. You guys have like 2 weeks ago.
Really?
Take the stuff.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You don't see me again, man. Nice knowing you. Catch you later. Well, time to fasten my seatbelt. I don't want to get yanked out of this car. Thanks, guys. Hombres or amigos or whatever. Wow, that's cool. So let's get arrested. I don't suppose it would be believable for me to say that I didn't know what I was doing with all these signs and things here. So that's it. That's it. They took all their stuff and left. Well, I'll be darned. Check it out. Lunch plates. There's the Christmas tree they were talking about. So where's all the holding tanks and where's all the protection against spills? That little berm, that's gonna keep shit from flowing over? That? Hell, I gotta get out and walk around. Hold it now. This is it. You telling me that is our buffer? What about over here? What's the buffer over here? Huh, I'm going to drive over there. Yeah, what's the buffer here? What the hell is this, man? Well, I think I've seen enough, don't you? Yes, I do. I've seen enough. Haven't I? Yes, you have. Okay, let's get out of here. Well, this is it. Take one more long look at that thing. The Christmas tree. So, what are they doing now? What's the status now? I don't know. Find out. Now this is Mears. And so we're, quite a ways inland from where I just was. What do these go for?
They're $1.25.
I wonder if they would have any. The reason I'm up here, I understand there's a fracking well, right in here, oil well.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and there's nothing online, there's no news about where it is.
Well, if you go, you're right here. If you go out Fox Road,
Okay,
which is,
that's right there.
and you take it out to, it doesn't show up, 48 and go south. It's out there somewhere. It's somewhere around out in here. That road south. Yeah, they sure are.
How do you know?
Because people can smell it all the time. They complain about it. Yeah.
It's funny because there's nothing online.
Really?
Yeah, nothing. I spent all morning trying to just find it. And then I heard it was up in Mears.
I thought there was something in the paper about it this week, but maybe not. I can't remember because I don't remember. Oh, those are free.
Oh, come on. Really? I was going to take a bag of them.
They're just free.
Well, let me grab a paper. And do you know anything else? Has there been any other issues with it? Because it's just so spooky. It would be.
Are there any other issues about it?
Well, nothing other than the smell. Trucks or something like that, anything like that.
No, they were trying to do another one out by the lake, but that didn't go.
Really?
No. In fact, they were trying to go under the lake, but I'm glad that one didn't go. They didn't find anything.
Oh, is that right? You can keep it. This is just going to end up on the floor of my car anyway.
Oh,
Yeah, thanks. But any other issues like heavy traffic with trucks? This is all stuff I hear about.
yeah,
but
there have been a lot of trucks too.
But nothing really bad that you would say is a sad thing that we're doing it. No, it's just smell real bad.
I don't know, because I don't know what's going to happen after they're done with it. Some people don't like it, but I don't really know. That's why I too many issues about it.
Yeah, I'll go.
Yeah, well, see if you can find it out there. Go to out to 48th and then turn south.
Okay, thanks
You
again.
should find something out there. If you go, I think it's probably on that dirt road.
Okay, we'll give it a try. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And last, we saved the best for last, according to Patrick Hoyman. He began his career as a geophysicist with Amoco Production Company, where he participated in the discovery of several significant oil and gas fields and held executive positions at CGG, Geotrace, Intera, and GECO Geophysical, and is a licensed professional geoscientist by the state of Texas. He is a resident of Pentwater and enjoys sailing as often as he can. Let's welcome Patrick Hoyman.
I don't like the Halliburton Loophole either, and I think most people in the industry would agree that we have to be transparent. We've got to improve that, and people understand that and they believe it. You talk to the CEOs of these companies, they're going to say the same thing. They believe it should be transparent. What I'm going to try to do now is just talk about physics and facts, not things that are made up, but stuff that's real. So this following stuff is my personal opinions. It's not those of any company or anything else. It's my own personal opinion based on my experience of looking at what's been happening. These guys, the DEQ, have done a tremendous job, in my opinion. I guess you could stand back and try and throw in some bombs someplace, but I don't see that. They got 6 years of experience. They've done 12,000 wells. They've protected the water resources. They haven't had any real incidents of harm here. And it is regulated. They're in state and federal compliance. This is a role model here. Now, very good point that was made earlier. What you don't want to do is you don't want to activate one of these faults. And the way you don't activate one of these faults is don't put a disposal well near a fault. And you can predict where faults are. You can measure that. You can shoot seismic. You can say where these things are, and you can avoid that. And there are rules about doing that, and it's only common sense to do something of that type. We looked earlier about the casing. And the fact that most of the problems happen because, well, the casing is the casing it has to be properly cemented in order to isolate. The aquifers are up here. So there should be rules and regulations in place to insist that you do good cementing. I agree 100%. This should be completely transparent. What these chemicals are, that should be transparent. There's no doubt about that. And I think the majority of the industry really feels that way right now. The operators certainly, because they don't want to have these kind of
why aren't they?
Meetings where people are, where it's adversarial. It shouldn't be adversarial. We're all in the same boat. We're all driving cars. We've got to figure out some way to go ahead and do that without going to a war to do it. And it's not going to just come from the Saudis or anything else. I don't particularly care for it. I'd much rather have stuff be done here. Okay, I think the Michigan disclosure regulations, what I could see, they look like they're good. According to what I saw, it included the chemicals. And if it doesn't include them completely, that's something that should get corrected, in my opinion. But I think the individual operators can go ahead and insist that that's done when they do an operation. This is an example of a fracking job in Michigan. The only thing that will be left when this is all done, or should be left, would be the Christmas tree, which is this thing right there. That should be cleaned up and remediated. If it isn't, then people should be fined. I mean, everyone agrees with that.
This afternoon, first, I would love to introduce John Willson, and is the president and CEO of Western Land Services, a firm providing services to the energy and pipeline industries. Let's give John Willson a warm welcome.
There has never been a confirmed case of groundwater contamination directly as a result of hydraulic fracturing. Those holding ponds early on, they leaked. You put a fabric over the top of rock and put that weight of water on it, it's almost guaranteed it's going to leak. Well, the DEP quickly saw that. Today, if you want to build a holding pond in the state of Pennsylvania, you've got to have it double lined. You've got to have a felt liner that's laid down and basically melted onto the rock. And then you put a second layer of fabric over the top. You monitor that inner layer, and you have to drill monitor wells all the way around it. Well, that wasn't how we started out there. Same thing with the casing program.
So where's all the holding tanks, and where's all the protection against spills? That little berm, that's going to keep shit from flowing over? That? Hell, I got to get out and walk around.